My name is Isabelle Carter. I'm 31 years old, and I was sitting at the kitchen table when my mother walked in and told me my brother was moving in with his two kids, so I needed to leave. She called me a parasite and gave me a week. I didn't argue. I packed a suitcase and walked out. What neither of my parents knew, what they'd never bothered to find out, was that the house they were standing in wasn't theirs at all. It had been mine legally for 3 years. If you truly love and appreciate your parents, take just 1 second to subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to us. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from? She didn't knock. Walking in, she never did. That was the first lesson I learned growing up in that house. That space was never something I was entitled to, not even the space inside my own chest. She sat down across from me with that deliberate slowness she used. When she'd rehearsed something, folded her hands, and delivered it like a business proposal. Your brother is moving in with his two kids, so you need to leave. You're a parasite, Isabelle. You always have been. I asked if she was joking. She laughed, short and flat, and told me I had a week. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I'd stopped arguing with my mother around 24 once I realized every argument I won still left me feeling like I'd lost something I couldn't name. I packed a suitcase and carried it to the door. My father sat watching television and never looked up. That was its own answer. I grew up the invisible child in a house where my brother Callum, 5 years older, loud and charming in the way that fools adults who don't look too closely, was the one everyone orbited. My parents paid for his college in full. Mine, they contributed nothing toward. I worked 2 jobs through university, took loans, graduated in finance with a very specific hunger that comes from being told your whole life you're less than someone else in your own family. After graduation, I moved back home temporarily. Temporarily became 2 years, then 3. My parents started speaking about me the way people speak about furniture they've gotten used to ignoring. My rent contributions were pocketed without a word. My groceries stocked the fridge without comment. The repairs I paid for, the bills I quietly covered when my father's pension came up short, the property tax I paid 1 year they simply didn't have. None of it ever entered whatever mental ledger my mother kept about my worth. What did get recorded was Callum's need. He'd gone through a divorce, had 2 kids, needed space, so I needed to go. Here's what my mother never knew. 2 years before that morning, my father had come to me privately, unusually vulnerable, and told me the house was in danger. A second mortgage he and my mother had mismanaged for years had pushed them toward foreclosure. He was ashamed, didn't want her to know how bad it had gotten, and asked if there was anything I could do. I'd been working in finance for 6 years by then. I negotiated with the bank, restructured the debt, and paid off the remaining balance in full with savings I'd built through years of discipline. In exchange, he signed the title over to me. Clean, legal, documented. My name went on the deed, his came off. My mother never once asked to see it. It had never occurred to her to wonder whose name was on the property she lived in, because she'd spent 30 years assuming everything around her simply belonged to her by default. That assumption was about to cost her everything she thought she understood. At 5 a.m. the next morning, my phone lit up with my father's name, call after call. I answered on the 8th. His voice was completely different from the man silently watching television the night before. It was shaking. My mother had gone looking for insurance papers and found the deed in the filing cabinet instead. He said she didn't understand, that she kept insisting it had to be a mistake, that my name shouldn't be on there. I told him quietly it wasn't a mistake, and he knew it wasn't. My mother called 20 minutes later, and if my father had sounded shaken, she sounded volcanic. She said there'd been some kind of error, accused me of manipulating my father in a vulnerable moment, called me a parasite again, which I found interesting given the circumstances. I let her finish, then told her plainly. The house is mine, Mom. Has been for 2 years. Dad came to me because you were months from losing it to the bank. I paid off the debt. I have the title, every document. This isn't a mistake, and it isn't open for discussion. Silence longer this time. For the first time in my memory, she had no immediate response. Over the next 72 hours, my mother called my aunt, who called my father's brother, who called me to explain that family property was a sensitive matter, and maybe I should be more flexible. I gave every one of them the same calm facts. The house had been 2 months from foreclosure. My parents told no one. I intervened with my own money legally with a signed agreement. There was no flexibility to offer, because there had been no wrongdoing to negotiate around. Callum called on day 2, opening with sympathy, agreeing the parasite comment was uncalled for, before smoothly pivoting to his own situation, his kids, his need for stability, landing on the suggestion that I simply move out and let them all stay since I was single with a flexible income, and he was a divorced father of two. I let him finish, then said, Callum, you're asking me to vacate my own home so you can move in. I want you to actually hear yourself say that. He didn't have an answer. Nobody in my family, I was realizing, had ever been asked to hear themselves clearly before. I went back to the house on day 4, not to fight, just because it was mine and I was done pretending otherwise. My mother looked smaller than she had 3 days earlier, the way people do when the architecture of their assumptions quietly collapses. I told them both I had no intention of removing them from the property. I told them Callum was welcome to visit his kids, but he wouldn't be moving in, because that decision now belonged entirely to me. My mother started crying, and I've seen her cry in ways designed to end conversations and redirect blame before. This wasn't that. This was real. I felt tired and sad, but underneath that, something solid, steady. The feeling of standing on ground that finally, unambiguously, belonged to me. I set 2 conditions going forward. First, the word parasite was never used in my presence again. Second, every financial contribution I'd made to that household over the years would be acknowledged out loud, not repaid, just acknowledged. My father agreed immediately. My mother took 3 days, but she did it too. Callum found a rental apartment. I repainted the hallway a color my mother had always vetoed. And every morning, I make coffee in that kitchen, sit at that table, and let it go warm on my own time, in my own house.